Hello, William. This is Jonathan, aka SmithyQ from Chess.com, and I'm here to analyze the game we played together. So here, let's take a look. We'll just jump right in. Right, opening started. The opening was great. Beginning, right? D4, D5. Let's see here. There we go. Right, C4, E6, etc., yada yada, all the way here. Everything's fine. Everything's perfect. No problem. Here, it was this move. It was Bishop F5, which we both agreed after the game was the mistake. Right? Because, well, we know why. The Queen B3 came. If we just back up, and we can figure out, just look at this position. What is the threat? Right? If Black were to do nothing, right? Like say he plays H6. What is the threat? The threat is to take the knight, because now Black would want to take with the Queen, but then D5 loses the defender, and so Black would be forced to take with the pawn and have this terrible position. And it's all because of the pawn on D5, right? The pawn on D5 is weak. Even if we go back here, right, it's technically defended by, right, oops, two pieces, right? It's still weak because we can remove one defender, and then you can't take with the queen. So that was the problem. Once you played Bishop F5, this created another weakness right here, which allowed the queen to come in. And so that's exactly what I did. Right? I removed the defender and then brought the queen in. And you said in your comment that you felt like you were dead here. And that's not completely true. What is happening is you are losing a pawn. Yes, and you don't have the most compensation in the world. But you're far from done. For instance, I was looking at a line C6, queen takes B7, queen B6. Because the best move appears to be, and the computer agrees, simply exchanging queens. And if you look at this position, okay, yes, Black is down a pawn, but is it that bad? Look, you got two bishops. They're flowing down the screen. You got C5 coming here, which will get rid of this pawn, letting this bishop come more. Your rook's on an open file, hitting this pawn. White has one piece developed. All this is over here. Is it that bad? I mean, it's not great, but this is obviously a heck of a lot better than what happened in the game. Now, the question, of course, would be, well, instead of White trading queens, what if White just took the rook? Right? A rook's a rook, right? Well, see, the counterattack happens. Queen takes B2, hitting both pieces. You try and save one. Well, it's check. And, well, this looks like a draw. Just goes back and forth. White doesn't want to do this, move his king. You just castle. Again, White has one piece developed. It's his rook. I guess his king's developed too. Queen stuck in the corner, right? The knight's defended. Terrible. You're only down an exchange. This is an awesome position for Black. Black's probably winning just because of the terrible position of the king, right? So there's no danger for White taking the rook. As we can see, is Black dead? No, Black's far from dead. There's a huge game to be played. Much, much more. Instead of playing c6, another possibility would be just castle. Again, White takes the pawn. We don't care. Okay, we develop peace. White takes another pawn. We don't care. We push back. White goes somewhere. All right. Just look at this. This is a variation I calculated after the fact. I would never play this as White. I'm just saying, if you look at this, White has won 3 pawns. But again, he's got... Look at his king. Look at all these things that are here. Black plays c5, and now what's going to happen is he's going to take the e-file. Wow, I'm really good at drawing arrows. He's going to take. The e-file is going to open up. He's got a rook coming into the king. Bishops are coming. He's going to win a pawn back here. If he wants to, he can go back and just sort of chase the queen, because the queen doesn't really have anywhere to go. Where can the queen go? The queen can't, the queen's stuck over here. Action's going to be coming down here. The queen's stuck over here. Black's got some play. I don't know if he's got 3 pawns worth of play, but he's got options. Why? Because White spent like 85 moves moving his queen over here. Those are just a couple of ways to show that Black could either, right, we have the one variation where he tries to trade queens and he gets to a safe, solid position. Or Black could gambit a whole bunch of material, right, and try and get play against the king. Ooh, interesting, right? Instead, what you played in the game was b6. And then after queen takes, queen takes, queen takes, you get into an incredibly passive position, which is essentially death in chess, especially against a higher rated player. It just is, because you're going to have no counterplay. I'm going to win, the higher rated opponent will win. Same thing, when I play a higher rated opponent, I try and avoid passivity at all costs, because if I can't do anything, well then sooner or later I'm going to lose. It's the way it happens. It's not fun. Because now you're forced to retreat your bishop. Now your bishop's on a terrible square. And now from here, for the next few moves, I'm just dominated by one thought. How can I attack you? How can I keep you passive? Because if I do nothing, if I just develop my pieces, I just do this, and I just do this, and I castle, that's 3 moves that you can get back into the game, where you can do something, where you can start creating threats. And so I'm simply saying I'm not having that. And so first thing I do, I see something, I can attack it. Rook c1. You can't play knight a6 because, of course, my bishop covers the square. You're forced to play a pawn move. All right. Well, now there's a new weakness. Pawn on c6. I'm going to attack that. Move the knight. You're forced to make a poor move to defend it. I got some extra variations here. I was looking at some things, but I think all your moves are terrible. You don't have a lot of. Your position isn't very good. Right? It's the way it is. Got a weakness here. All right. So I bring my knight out. Knight f3. I'm getting ready to attack it. Okay. I want you to notice that my entire thought process is attacking something. I'm just moving forward. In this case, the weakest thing is the pawn on c. Right? We got attack. The knight's going to come in to attack it. The rook is attacking it. It's possible to imagine the bishop coming in to attack it. Right? Everything's going on that square. Because if you're forced to defend that, then you have to defend it. You can't make any threats. I'm up material. I'm going to win slowly. You made a good move here. You played a5, kicked my knight away. It's now on a much worse square. It's blocking my bishop, right? Bishop can't come out. But now you need to make one more good move here. Again, my threat is knight e5 and attacking something. The move a5, if we imagine, it's kicking my knight away. But if my knight just reappears on the e5 square, then a5 really didn't do anything. And so what you needed to do here was to play f6 to stop my threat. By doing that, you stop my knights. Now my bishop is kind of stuck to be here. Maybe I'll move knight f4 and bishop d3. It doesn't matter. It's much better for you than what happened in the game. I'm not going to lie and say your position is great right now, but it's better. Instead, you simply played knight a6. That's the only square for your knight, but it's a pretty terrible square. And then after the knight e5 move, again, I'm attacking the c-pawn, and now your knight's hanging, as we found out in the game. Sorry, that didn't work. Yeah, you moved the rook to try and defend, which made sense, but then I simply take it, and then that's GG. That was the game right there. And so, if we're to back up again, just go through this quickly. Everything here. Your opening was fine, right? And then when you played bishop f5, I understand what you're doing. In any other position, this would be a great move, because what does white want to do? White wants to put his bishop here. Usually his queen goes here, right? And he plays the standard queen's gambit stuff. With your bishop on f5, you're stopping those ideas. You're making my bishop develop to a worse square. The problem is, again, this pawn is weak, and whenever this bishop moves, we got the weakness on the b file. This is why normally in this position, black will generally play a c6, or he'll play knight d7. The idea with the knight d7 is that, again, if white tries to do any of this, he's recapturing with the knight, and the d-pawn is staying protected. So there's no problems that we have in this game. Then if white tries the queen b3, you've got the b6, or you've got a rook b8, you've got something to keep the pawns, and there's nothing's hanging. That's the idea. Of course, you'll notice, if the c6 or the knight bd7, let's look at this one, is that your bishop doesn't have the best way into the game, which is true, right? Which is why this variation is nice for white, is that black needs to spend a lot more time developing this bishop. If you could just play bishop f5 in this position, then this opening would be perfect. No one will play it as white. But you can't because of the trick. Right? So that's kind of unfortunate that the game just sort of happened here like this, but, well, sometimes that's chess. Now, because our game was so short, I took the liberty, I hope you don't mind, of looking at some of your other games, just that way I can see what you do in different positions. That way I can actually give you advice beyond don't play 6, bishop f5. So I looked at your recent game against Jonathan Piano. He's rated about 300 points higher than you. Very similar opening, actually. This time you were white. All right, simple. I don't like this move. You played e3. If you think back to the game that we played, you and I exchanged the pawn, then I moved my bishop out. The bishop is much more active than behind the pawn. Anyway, we'll just keep going. Boom, boom. We get to this position right here. And you played a3 in the game. I'm thinking, in all honesty, the best move for white is probably to take the pawn here. Then after black retakes, the position's actually completely symmetrical. You've got a move right now, so you've got the smallest of small advantages. But that's okay. It's not the only move. You played a3, which is fine. Probably. Then after c takes d4, you made the following decision. You took with your knight, then you took with your queen to take with the pawn. And you're left with an isolated queen pawn in an endgame with no queens. I'm going to make... This is conjecture. I don't know if it's true or not. A lot of beginners, I was like this at one point till I read Tarash's book, The Game of Chess, hate the isolated queen pawn, right? So this position right here. And so after takes, a lot of people, they won't take back with the pawn. They fear it. And if you listen to some grandmasters, they talk about the isolated queen pawn, they say it's this huge weakness, yada, 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 whatever. But the truth is, it's only weak in some positions. And in all honesty, in amateur level, so if you're under 1800, often the isolated queen pawn is a strength. This is because, let's say black plays like he does in the game. He plays b6. What you can do is you can play rook e1. You've got bishop g5. You've got knight e5. You've got queen f3. You could take the knight and maybe even bring the queen over to h5. Rook to d1. You've got this active play. You've got all these moves in the world. It's much easier for white to play at the amateur level, especially. What's black going to do? Black tries to gang up on the pawn, but right now it's defended by 2 pieces. The bishop can always come over. The rook can always come over. The threat of d5 is always hanging in the air. Even if black does win the pawn, what's he get? He gets 1 pawn. That's it, right? You've got all these moves, all this activity, all this good stuff. Yes, the pawn is weak, but look at these arrows I drew. There's so many arrows. There's good potential here, right? Instead, we exchange all the pieces, and now we really are left with a weakness. We don't have a knight anymore that can jump into e5. The rook on e1 isn't doing much. The threat of d5 isn't really there. And what black does in this game, he does it very well, is that he's always attacking that pawn, or he's making it impossible for you to do anything else. Look, you need to defend the pawn. Then he plays his bishop over here, so you can't advance the pawn. So the pawn is stuck on this square, and you've got no active plan. Whereas black, okay, he attacks. He keeps pushing you back. Now you really can't defend your pawn. You try and go this. Oh, he invades. He attacks again. Again, one of these things that the higher rated players do is one of the things that we understand is we're always making threats. We're trying to always go forward. And then, in general, weaker opposition, they don't know what to do, and they fall apart. And that's what happened here, right? As you're losing the pawn, you're going to lose the other pawn. The bishop's attacked. Well, I guess it's defended by the knight, but it's not very well for you right now. And I would say the problem in this game is that you never really made a threat. You never had a chance to make a threat, because again, we go back, you have simply the worst structure, and black has all the time in the world you can't do anything. Instead, though, if we go back, when black exchanges, if you were to take with the pawn instead, now you have a chance, right? Again, you can play bishop e3, rook e1, knight comes to e5 or to g5. You can think about sacrifices on this, especially if black does that b6 idea. Again, if he does this, let's say, this. All right. Well, you can bring a knight to here. Maybe knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. Ooh. Bring the queen over. Maybe the queen goes to b3. There's some checks here. Like, I'm not saying it works right now, but there's possibilities. There's stuff that's going on. And black would have to work a lot harder to win this position than this position, as the game showed. All right, let's look at another one. Okay, so this is your game against Chatillon? Chatillon? I don't know. And this is a game, this and the other game against Jonathan Piano made me possibly think you might have this prejudice against the isolated queen pawn, the IQP. Because in this position, sorry, I'll just back up. Where is it? Okay, you know, right here, and white might be threatening to give you the isolated queen pawn by exchanging everything and you take back. And so you played b6. So that way now, after all the exchanges, I'll just do that here, right? You don't have the isolated queen pawn, right? But again, the isolated queen pawn wouldn't make a difference in this. I don't know if you're thinking like this, but it's a common thing I see in many amateurs, many beginners. And so don't fear the isolated queen pawn. Because after b6, you'll notice two things. This diagonal is a bit weaker. This square in particular is weaker. And a knight on e5 could jump right in. That's what happened in the game, right? After castles, the knight jumps in, the queen comes in, then we got this uncomfortable pressure. And then here, this happened. And this game was really interesting to me, just looking at this. Because in my head, there's no way white can play all these moves, 1, 2, 3, queen, just to win a single pawn over here. And the question is, how's that knight going to escape? You played bishop b7, and after knight c3, queen d8. And then after knight b5, well, white's living, I guess. He's getting away with it. I still think black's got a pretty good position here. Especially if you looked at when the game you played knight g3, you force this g3 weakness with that bishop there. If you were to take here, look at this bishop. Absolutely breathing fire. If you can just get your queen onto this diagonal somehow, you're sitting pretty. Maybe now you push e5. Ooh. Maybe now you take here because he's forced to take with the pawn. And then e5. Ooh. Maybe you take, and you bring the bishop over to f6. Fascinating. Maybe you play h5, h4, trying to open up lines this way. f5, maybe not f5. Okay, that's going a little bit too far. Maybe the knight comes here and then to here. All right, got to worry about f3 perhaps, but you got these ideas. You got potential here because you forced the g3. Even better though, if we look back at this position here, right? Rook's attacking the queen, knight is pinned. Sorry, rook is eyeing the queen. The knight is pinned, so this knight can't move. The only way white can defend the knight is by bringing the knight to c3. You played queen b8 immediately. So instead, let's go back here. And so instead of playing queen b8 immediately, what if we play bishop d6? The idea of bringing the bishop back. Ooh, all right. After the knight comes, bishop's over here. What the heck does white do? All right, he does something. We exchange. Now the queen comes over and attack. The knight's lost. Just by changing the move order just a little bit, you're able to take advantage so much more. You actually win the piece, you're going to win the game. Right? Probably, because white spent all this time just to win a stinky Leasley pawn, which he can't even keep. Yeah. Because, if we look back here, we have to realize that white's only threat, if you will, is to bring the knight to b5. That's the only thing he can do to keep this. And so, by using the bishop instead of using the queen right away, that would give you that little extra tempo in order to, well, win the knight, instead of, well, look what happened in the game, right? Sort of nothing good happened. Right here, also, by the way, you had a great chance. Take the rook for the two knights, right? Because, again, minor pieces were 3, rooks were 5. A lot of minor amateurs, they don't like giving up a rook for 2 minor pieces, even though it's much better. It's much better to have the 2 minor pieces. I mean, just take a look. I mean, those knights kind of rained havoc on you for the last little bit, eh? And then you resigned before you could lose. You ended up losing the rook anyway, right? So there's an idea. So when I was looking at these games, that's why I thought you might have a prejudice against the isolated queen pawn. Maybe I'm completely off. Hopefully not, because I just would have wasted this last 10 minutes. But, well, those are my thoughts. There's also something else I'm looking at when I see your games, and I'll show you 2 quick examples. Okay, so this is your game against Patel Prashant. So just quickly go over. I just want to go through this really quickly. So if we look right here, again, you generally play the openings fairly well for someone who's 1300, right? You don't make a lot of mistakes from the games that I looked at, like super obvious ones. Okay, bishop f5. Here is one where you just played f6 to the bishop g5, which is strange to me. It seems to me like you want to push the bishop back. Obviously, you protect the queen. Let's look at this. Just look at this position for a second. Is how many moves do you have to stop this threat? How many moves? Okay. Well, one. Okay. You could play f6. Right? Is that the best move? Probably not. In fact, it might be the worst move. I'm sorry. Maybe knight e7 is worse. Doesn't matter. You can block with the bishop. You can block with the knight. You can move the queen. Say to b6, just like in our game, where now you're attacking this pawn, the bishop's over here doing nothing. Then you could chase it away with h6. Aha, which is a much better move. You can even block with knight e7 if it really felt like it. h6, g5, put the bishop on g7. There's a whole bunch of things you could have done. And instead, what it looks like to me is that you simply played f6 almost reflexively. So that way, aha, I'm pushing the bishop back. This gives you a long-term weakness, though. If you just look here for a second, where you play this knight to e7, and your bishop is stuck. Your bishop is very unhappy for the rest of the game. In fact, your bishop does nothing the rest of the game. If we just look at something for a second, if we were to play bishop e7 and he exchanges, let's look at what happens. Well, there is no bishop to be unhappy anymore. You're up in development. In fact, look at this. You're doing fantastic in this position. He's stuck with a crappy bishop. Right? His knight's not going to do anything. You're going to castle. You're going to play d5. You're going to play a6, b5, bishop. You've got a whole bunch of stuff happening. Ooh, good for you. Just by exchanging. Yes, f6 pushes his bishop back, but now he's got this good bishop, and your bishop is bad. Interesting. All right. Anyway, that's not the most important thing. That's like it's there. Not the most important. You managed to win a pawn. You got your king out. Things are going great. Right here, you're now realizing, okay, your king's stuck in the center. Should probably castle. What do I do with this bishop? Well, you can move this knight somewhere, and then play the bishop d7. That takes some time. The other possibility is you play g6, fianchetto the bishop. Also not great, but what are you going to do? You played g6. Then after d4, you played bishop g7, and I call this tunnel vision. What happens is you had this idea, you wanted to play bishop g7 so you could castle, and then you did that without ever asking yourself, what is my opponent's threat? Because in between g6 and bishop g7, your opponent made a move, d4. And if I were to ask you right now, if white had a move, what would he do? You'd probably answer pretty quickly, he played d4, he probably wants to take the pawn, because he has 1, 2, 3 attackers, and I've got 2 defenders. Again, it's pretty obvious, right? But what happened is you were so tunnel visioned in your idea of playing bishop g7 that you played it without even thinking. Or you were thinking, but you're only thinking about your idea, not about what white was going to do. And then you get in trouble, right? All of a sudden the position's opening up. You're not really down a pawn because you already won a pawn. But now your king's in the center, and white's coming in, and then we fall for a tactic. That's pretty crappy. Right? But the mistake really is what I call this tunnel vision. Why did it happen? Because you're so focused on bishop g7. If you were to see, oh yeah, my pawn's attacked, I'll play b6. Let's just play it. After take, well, your pawn's defended, everything's defended. You don't have time to play bishop g7 castle. I'm not sure. Well, you're up a pawn, so you can't be worse. It's certainly better than in the game, right? Just by asking, what is the threat? All right? And I got one more. This one might show even better. Yeah, this will really show the tunnel vision. Okay, so this is your game against Carnicats. So if we look at this position, I just want to back up, look at the opening, because I think this game really shows to me that you understand basic opening principles, right? You offered a gambit. Gambits are great at Emerald. Definitely. Keep doing this. Because look what happens. Look at this position that you get. Boom! You've castled. E-castle is a fairly interesting game, actually. I look at this. But look, you got your pieces developed. It's very easy to bring this bishop. You got opening lines for your rooks. You got the ideal center. You're doing great. Like, I don't know if you can ask for anything more in the opening. So that's why I'm not suggesting that openings are a weakness for you. From what I've seen. Then you played this. You played d5. d5 is not a bad move. d5 is a great move. I don't know if it's the best move. I think bishop f4, finishing development, because then we're possibly threatening knight b5 or knight d5, right? Knight d5 is hitting the queen. It's also hitting this pawn, right, with the bishop and the knight. You can't really defend it against both. And yeah, he's in trouble. If he tries this g5, you got bishop g3, so your bishop's defending your king while attacking his king. Your attack's going to be much faster than his. Yeah. Though d5 is good as well. The reason I like d5 is because it's blocking his bishop, right? You've got these two super pawns in the center they're defending. This bishop's got nothing, right? This bishop's going to be a weakness. You can play a4, a5. Let's put that on the board, right? Take here, your rook's coming in. You can then play bishop e3, attacking that, or the bishop goes to f4, attacking there. Knight comes in. You've got a whole bunch of ideas here. What then happened in this position is that you played queen d3, bishop a6, and that was it. Now just look what happened in this position. Let's just back up, okay? So from d5, we played d5. All these ideas, look what black's got. Black's got enough. We then switch over to the position we just had. Where was it? Boom. So what's happened in this position? All right. So we've moved our queen here. That's it. Black managed to move his queen to a better square, his bishop to a better square, and he no longer has a bishop hitting against these two pawns. Holy crap. Back up again. So from here, white's got a lot of good ideas. Black is pretty passive. He's got a terrible bishop. To here, where black's actually pretty darn active. Knight g4 is a threat. Bishop d6 is a threat. Maybe bishop c5, g4. Holy crap, black's got a lot of freaking good ideas right now. And white's attack, well, it's pretty non-existent at this point. What happened here? Here's what I think happened. Okay, the first d5 was a good idea. Going against this bishop, attacking the knight. All right, I think that was fine. I think it was great. But we then needed to realize that the bishop is his weakness. And instead, you got an idea similar to, for example, in the Sicilian Dragon. Right, is very common. Let me just quickly do this. Right, is black is going to. Oh, come on. Gets his bishop here, right? And everyone knows that we want to get rid of that bishop. And so a very common idea, you don't want to do it right now, is this bishop h6 idea. Because then we get a situation like this, in which the pawn comes up, right? We exchange. Something weird just happened. Anyway, you probably know what I'm talking about, right? So you thought the same idea here. The difference is it takes a heck of a lot longer to do that. And in fact, if you were to try that, whoops, attack stopped. He's still got this good bishop. You've got no way to get in. You can't even sacrifice the b pawn anymore. So you had the idea. You tried to use the idea, right? Get rid of that bishop. But it only helped black. You got so tunnel visioned on this one idea that you ignored all the other potential ideas that you had, right? And then what happened is, again, the remaining of this game is actually incredibly interesting, right? Just looking through that, you notice that black's bishop is now dominating the board because all of our pawns are on white squares. Ooh, the ideas of maybe this coming in, sacrificing, this, sacrificing. However, and then here, aha, I remember this as well now, is that again, you're still thinking about attack. And so if you look at your next couple of moves here, you're playing b4, you're playing a5, you're playing rook b1. Even though these ideas, they no longer work in this position. It's not happening. As you see in the game, right? Black's attack is way faster because his bishop can help and yours can't. Right here was a chance for you to play bishop g5. Pinning the knight. There's only one way to defend it. You can then increase the pressure. Hey, you just want a piece. Easy. What'd you do instead? You're so focused on your attack, you play rook b1. Ooh, black attacks. You still have a chance to play bishop g5. Right? You're pinning. You're attacking this. He has no way. What the hell is he going to do? Again, you still have queen f3 coming. Queen's now defending this pawn as well. All right? Instead, you played a4. You were so tunnel vision, you were so focused on this attack that, like, that was it. And then what happened, if we just look at here, in this position, you've essentially lost. Right? You're strategically losing, because you've got these open files against your king, which his rooks are easily going to slide into, and you can't do anything, because if you try and push a pawn, he's going to push the opposite pawn, and then, well, it's stuck. Okay, let's push this pawn. He's going to push that, right? And you're stuck, and maybe you can try a sacrifice like this, maybe. Yeah, down a pawn, he's got the queen coming over to defend, or even just mating you instantly. I don't know. His attack is always faster, as we see in the game here, right? Yeah. And you resigned because, of course, queen coming in down to h2 is mate. Okay. All right. So, in conclusion, if I want to just sort of wrap everything up into a neat, tidy conclusion for you to look at, I would look at this, is that for your areas to improve, there's two potentials. One is for sure, and this is true for, again, everyone at all times, right? Especially at lower rated, is that we get into tunnel vision, right? Vodoop, is we start thinking about our ideas and we ignore everything else. Both our opponent's threats and attacks, his ideas, and also our other ideas, because we think our one idea is perfect, we just keep playing it and we miss other things. And so that's something to be aware of. And then second, this is a potential, I'm not completely sure, but it's likely true, isolated queen pawn. It's queen's pawn. There should be an apostrophe there? Doesn't matter. Is, again, the IQP doesn't necessarily need to be a weakness, and if you're really, really worried about it, you need not be. In fact, again, at lower levels, right, below 1800, in general, having the isolated queen's pawn is an advantage if you keep the queens on the board. Right? So that's something to look at, potentially. My suggestions for you are, for every move, is to think about this. You should always ask yourself, what is my opponent's threat? And then you should also ask yourself, what can I attack? Because again, what higher rated players do, what I did, what Jonathan Piano did in his game against you recently, is that he had a threat almost every single move. Never let you get comfortable. Right? That's wasn't nice playing against either me or him. We're both named Jonathan. That's interesting. So if you can ask yourself, what can I attack? And you can start doing that on every move. You just keep hammer blowing away. Well, people aren't going to have very much fun playing against you. Exactly. And if you can ask yourself, what is the threat? Then that's going to help get rid of the tunnel vision, because by asking that question, you're going to be looking, and you're going to be realizing, okay, oh, I got to defend against this. Or what about this? And you can also do it in reverse. What are my threats? What are the things that I can do in this position? Ooh, that's interesting, right? Because if you can ask these questions and you can do it automatically, it's going to be hard at Blitz, right? But in daily chess, where you've got lots of time to think, if you always ask these questions until it becomes automatic, it becomes a habit, I think your rating's going to absolutely soar. Yeah, because you can see tactics. You've done some nice tactics in your game. You've fallen victim for some tactics as well. That happens, right? Your openings aren't terrible, right? You know the basic principles. By doing these two things, I think it can really help you. Well, that's okay. Well, that's all I have there. I hope this was helpful. It was a bit longer than I thought. Hopefully you've got a lunch break or something where you can you can watch this. And if you ever want to play a game, that's fine. If you ever want to talk to me, again, you can message me at chess.com, or you can go to my blog. It's smithyq.com. It's basically all about chess, and I've got game analysis and other things. I might be doing YouTube videos. If you found this useful, could you tell me? Because then I might make actual public videos rather than just private ones for some students. Okay. Again, I'm Jonathan, and I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day. Bye for now.